Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the Xs and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the Xs and Argos season finale and awards extravaganza, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. The double blue confetti has long been swept away. The smell of champagne is but a distant memory following yet another Grey Cup victory by your Toronto Argonauts. And now, in our final episode of this podcast season, we will take a look back at this memorable year and begin to look ahead to next year. My name is Ben Grant. I'm joined as always by JB. We got a lot to talk about today as we will go through this past year. We'll talk about some of the things coming up, some of the news, as well as our much anticipated Xs and Argos Awards, which has become an annual tradition here. But before we get into any of that, I want to thank you for being a part of turning Something in the Water Brewing into an essential component in the Toronto Argonauts game day experience. Our listeners have been amazing in supporting this fantastic brewery. They've done their part in producing terrific beer. They have outstanding beer and a wonderful selection, great food, and of course the great location right beside BMO Field, steps from their practice facility. It's been great all season long to see you guys there, not only pre-game, but also throughout that playoff run. JB was down there hanging out with you during games as they broadcast the playoff road games. And that was a real spectacle, a real event. And you, our listeners, have been a huge part of that, and they're really bursting into the scene as a must visit on Argos game days. So thank you, the listener, and thanks to Something in the Water for being a tremendous sponsor. They've been so much fun to work with these last two seasons, and we hope we can do it all again with them next year. All right, JB, let's get into this end of season episode. We always start out with the question, was the season a success? I think we have to say yes. They won the Grey Cup. You can't say it's not a success, but maybe a bit of a surprise success. We have picked the Argos in the past to win the Grey Cup. This year, neither of us had the Argos winning this. So this is even more a successful season than we've had. You look at the adversity. I just felt they were going up against too many things. I think you probably did too. How do you look back upon this 2024 season?
Well, I knew they were going to be good, but we both knew that they had lost an incredible amount of talent. If you look at the quality of players that left town, it was a lot. I knew that they were facing adversity with the quarterback situation. I think those combined, the hangover from the collapse against Montreal. We knew it was going to be challenging, but I did feel that they were a good team. I thought they would win the East. I didn't expect them, I didn't sort of call them to win the championship, but I felt they were going to be good. But, it was kind of a best case scenario, how they gelled in the second half of the season, because they flashed moments where they looked great, but they were more uneven this year than they had been in the past couple of years. So, it was in a lot of ways more fun than watching the steamroller that was last year.
Well, the ending was certainly more fun.
Yeah.
But you look at that talent, and that's the thing, the talent that was lost. And I think nobody could get over that. Like, I think we were able to see beyond that because we did predict success. I think I had them losing in the East Final. I think you may have had them losing in the Grey Cup. I can't remember. But we had them there. They were certainly in the picture. But some outlets had the Argos not even making the playoffs because you lost to Darius Pickett, AJ Ouellette, Dwayne Hendricks, Jamal Peters, Qantas Stiggers. Like, this is a lot of guys we're talking about, really important players that were gone. And the pieces that they brought in all worked out. It seems like everybody they brought in to play, whether it was Jake Serezna through the trade or whether it's Kadeem Carey, who seemingly nobody else in the league wanted and turned out to be potentially the best running back in the CFL this season. They did such a good job of finding those guys and then bringing in rookies who were impactful, Mackay Polk, Ralph Hawley, and it just felt like yet again everybody that the front office went to worked out, and that's a must. Like when you have that turnover, and they're gonna be tested again this offseason, because that's the curse of winning the Grey Cup. And, Hamilton listeners, you don't know what that's like and probably can't imagine. But the Argos have had to go through this a number of times where you win the Grey Cup, it's great, but now every free agent suddenly has a tax on them because they're Grey Cup champions, and it's going to cost more to bring them back. And everyone sat at home watching them play those last few weeks of the playoff season, and so they're in demand. So I think it was a fantastic job from the front office. But what do you say about the coaching staff, who not only had to manage that, but also the suspension of their reigning MOP, Chad Kelly?
Well, that was probably the most impressive thing all year, was essentially going 500 without a quarterback. Not to be too blunt, but they were able to kind of piece together and scheme up and magic trick and misdirect just enough to stay above water with a couple of quarterbacks that the league knew could not threaten them downfield. And that, from a coaching perspective, to keep the team believing, to keep the team from giving up, to adjusting to the league really kind of crunching down on their lack of quarterback play, I thought was really impressive. I mean, we know that they can coach a very talented team. We saw that last year. That's one talent ability as a coach. But then the coaching staff showed a whole other gear where they had a team that wasn't more talented than their opponent, and they were still able to grind out wins. So I thought that really showed an ability to game plan, which is probably their best trait, I think, as a coaching staff. Probably their most underrated trait, but I think their best trait is how good they are at game planning opponents. Both offensively and defensively. They don't kind of get called out for it or shouted out for it very often, but they're clearly very good, because you see when they don't lose to teams, more than once, or they don't lose back to backs against teams. So yeah, it was a fantastic coaching job by everybody this year.
Yeah, the whole staff contributed in some way, right? Like you had, Ryan Dinwiddie and Pete Costanza, obviously, working with the receivers and the quarterbacks in that sort of play. Obviously, those guys were outstanding, because I expected more from Cameron Dukes to start the season. I really thought he would have, I guess, been more able to get the ball downfield than we saw. I still really like Cameron Dukes. He's always going to be a guy that I'm rooting for. But his play it didn't give you as many options, I guess, as I thought he would this season. And they found ways around that. They found plays, and they found ways to score points. Like, that's not like going 5-4. They had some tough stretches in there. Like that 5-4 includes wins over, Winnipeg, for example. Like that was not an easy win over Montreal in there too. Like that was not an easy run to start the season. That was huge. And then you had, Coach Sweet on the offensive line trying to manage pieces in and out, movement. Darius Sirocco, the all-star center from last year, never played a snap all season, and yet the offensive line was among the best in the CFL. You got Mike Miller in there as the quarterback coach, who's working with Arbuckle and Dukes and getting those guys up to speed. And then, of course, bringing in Chad Kelly down the stretch, and then going back to Arbuckle. And obviously Drew Tate on the staff has helped out with that as well. And then special teams, Mickey Donovan doing his part. You had, for the second year in a row, the league's best returner, and what Janarian Grant was able to do, especially in the early half of the season. But it's not just Janarian Grant, it's not just the punters and kickers, the coverage teams that Donovan was able to put together, and the special teams magic they seem to be able to create with guys like Jack Kassar, Dan Adebaboye all season long, who were awesome. And then some of the new guys too, like Demetrius Maxey on the D-line. I don't know if we've seen a better D-line performance in recent years for him to come in. I know he's dealing with a lot of talent there, but Ralph Hawley wasn't even part of the plan. He wasn't even in the picture to start the season. And he's a coach that got that guy up to speed. Myron Lewis, the new addition to the secondary, you look at the development of guys like Benji Franklin, Tavares McFadden, who nobody wanted. He was cut by the Argos, released by the Red Blacks, just sitting there. And they brought him in and they turned him into a playoff star. He was even better than I think he was at his peak as a Toronto Argonaut in previous seasons. And then Dominic Picard, the running backs coach, he comes in and puts Kadeem Carey into the stratosphere, the best season that he has ever had. He's already a good running back, a former starter with the Chicago Bears. Like he turned him back into that player that we saw half a dozen years ago. And then the co-defensive coordinators, William Fields and Kevin Iben, and that's contributions in the secondary and the linebacker spot too. What a fantastic job, because those guys were ultimately responsible for a huge part of this Grey Cup win against Winnipeg, as the defense was just lights out good throughout the playoffs, especially after Chad Kelly went down. So this coaching staff went above and beyond. And it comes back to Ryan Dinwiddie, who is responsible for assembling this staff in part and for leading this staff. And I think this transitions nicely into talking about something that a lot of CFL fans and a lot of Argos fans have been talking about over the last month, which is how close is Ryan Dinwiddie to being the best coach in Argos history? What do you think, JB? How far away is he from being that guy?
Well, I think a few more years are needed. I think I don't know why I feel that way. I don't feel that way about players. I think for a coach, you probably need to have 7 to 10 years for me to consider you Pantheon worthy or eligible. However, I would, not to be too much of an equivocator here, I would say that he is tracking towards being their best coach. I think clearly his record is pretty platinum. His record in the playoffs is very good. They should have won the Grey Cup last year. Certainly, there was nothing he could do about what happened last year. And think if he did. Think if he had won 3 Grey Cups
In 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why there wouldn't be a much more NFL, NCAA heat. I'm grateful that there isn't that heat. I would hate to lose him to the NCAA. Yeah, but I mean, look, clearly he's a fantastic coach, and I see no reason why 3 years from now we're not calling him the best coach in Argos history.
I think he's going to be legitimately, I think he's legitimately in the conversation now. And I think after next year, if next year goes well, even if it doesn't end in a Grey Cup victory, if it ends in a playoff run of sorts, I do believe that you can start talking about Ryan Dinwiddie as the best Argos coach of all time. I know you feel probably that's premature, and I agree. I feel the same way with your double standard. Like we both feel like Doug Flutie is the best quarterback in Argos history, despite having been with the team for 5 minutes, and yet a coach who coaches 2 seasons obviously is not enough. I don't know why we have that double standard, but it's there. But let me put some numbers in perspective because if you're sort of scoffing at that, if you're listening to this and thinking, he's only been here for 5 minutes, he can't be considered among the greats of all time. Let me tell you why he's currently in the conversation. So if you look at the most wins of all time, you've got Bobo Bilovic at top with 89, but he coached for 1 billion years in Toronto. Pinball Clemens, 67. Again, great coach, but doesn't have nearly the win percentage. Neither of those guys do have the win percentage that Dinwiddie has. No, not even close. Like Dinwiddie's coming in at a 67%, more than 67% regular season win percentage, and 70% in the playoffs. This is better than anybody else that I'm going to be talking about here. And Don Matthews, Leo Cahill, they're both guys that Dinwiddie probably passes next year. Cahill at 54, Matthews at 49 wins. Dinwiddie is currently sitting at 46 wins. If he even goes 500 next year, he's in 3rd place all time history for Argos head coaches, and the only guys he's behind are Clemens and Obilovich, both of whom have many more seasons under their belt, and both of whom are nowhere close in terms of coaching win percentage. And so even at that alone, I think he's definitely in the conversation, but I think that alone maybe even qualifies him as being the best of all time. But then you add to that the Grey Cups. To have won a Grey Cup in 50% of his seasons in 2 of 4 years. Next year could be big. If he's able to win the Grey Cup next year, it's over. That's done. He is the greatest coach in Argos history, and you can't argue it. No other coach has won more than 3 Grey Cups. There's only been 2 guys that have done it at all, which is Ted Morris and Lou Heyman. And I think Ted Morris is an interesting one. He reminds you look back at his career. He doesn't, those seasons were a lot shorter and everything else, but he's another guy that maybe you can talk about as being mentioned in the same conversations as Dinwiddie, because I believe he coached for 6 seasons and then has those Grey Cups and has not only as a player but also had a wonderful tenure in Toronto as a head coach. So I think there's he's maybe in the conversation too, but I think it's really difficult to compare eras. I just think you're looking really to compare him to Pinball Clemens and Bob Obilovich, and I think with any kind of season next year, he probably passes those guys. Why do we have that double standard, JB? Why is it not the same with players? Why do we make coaches coach? Like, he's already coached 4 years. That's double the time Flutie spent in Toronto. Why can't we honor him right now?
I think there's always a feeling that longevity is a criteria for a coach. That like one of your skill sets is to be able to do it for a longer period of time, maybe more than a player. So I think that's kind of like a category in itself. So I think being able to do it for 7 years or 10 years, I think is something you're looking from a coach, as opposed to a hypothetical coach who is able to achieve something in a couple of years and then kind of burns out. I think that's probably where it comes from for me is that ability to keep coaching. Can you keep coaching, which is what you ask of your coaches.
And to play devil's advocate, I think he's been through in 4 years what we're asking of. Like, the reason we want that sample size to be higher is because you want them to go through rebuilds and restructures and not just inherit a good team and win a few seasons with them. But I would argue he's done that in 4 years. He's had 4 starting quarterbacks over those 4 years. He's set a CFL record with a 16-2 season last year. It's got the 2 Grey Cup wins. He's gone into seasons with Nick Arbuckle, with McLeod Bethel-Thompson, with Chad Kelly, with Cameron Dukes. He's won a Grey Cup twice with his backup quarterback. Those are credentials don't normally. That's not the normal way to go about achieving this kind of record.
No, I agree. I mean, I think, you have even convinced me a little. Like, if I mean, I could revisit this after next season and be on board.
Is he the best coach in the CFL right now? Like, if you were starting a franchise, brand new, you're starting the, let's say everyone's up for grabs, and you are starting the Atlantic Schooners. Is he the one guy you'd want to bring in as a head coach?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would have said Mike O'Shea, but I think that he outcoached Mike O'Shea
twice
in the Grey Cup.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think it is him. I think like you say, he's had different quarterbacks, he's had different systems, he's had different defensive coordinators. He's been able to navigate it all. He's obviously incredibly bright. He raided Calgary and then that ran out. He works really well with a fantastic front office. I mean, I think the front office goes hand in hand here because they use the players that they are given very, very well, and they have been very efficient at deciding or figuring out who can play and who can't for them. And I think that's a sign of a good coach is he has a certain style that he wants his players to do, and it's probably easier to find people to fit that. Um, yeah, he is the best coach in the CFL to my mind right now. I don't, with due respect to other guys who are pretty good. Um, yeah, he is definitely my choice.
Yeah, and I would have gone into the season like you, giving the nod to Mike O'Shea because of what he's been able to do. But I think Dinwiddie passed him this year with the obstacles that he had to go through. He did an unbelievable job,
And
and his whole
I
staff
appreciate
with
you
him.
saying Team Atlantic and not Team Victoria.
Yeah, I know.
CFL's
Well,
grand plans to expand to Victoria,
I'm
British Columbia.
I'm still dreaming, but we'll see if that ever comes to fruition. But I do think it's important to shout out the front office too, because they have given him pieces to work with. But not all staffs can teach that way, and I think that's what maybe separates this coaching staff and separates Dinwiddie from some other good coaches. Is I think there are a lot of coaches who can take good players and produce well, and we saw Dinwiddie do that last year. But this year's team is really different, and you mentioned this, but taking first year CFL players, taking rookies, guys like Tyshawn Blackburn, who's out there as a draft pick, and getting him involved as much as he was. It's a whole staff effort, but they seem to do that time and time again. Like, let's not forget, like Peter Nicastro, where like right from the word go was right into the mix, and they constantly bring in new Americans and get them up to speed immediately. And you see improvement throughout the year, whether it's from the secondary. We saw a lot of that this year. Like that is great coaching, because it's not just scheming. It's not just taking guys that know how to do it and implementing your scheme on them and having them go and be excellent. It's taking them and they're an unknown and teaching them the differences and how to do it and skill building, and then adding that to your scheme, which is catered to them and their strengths, and having that be successful. Like that really is what separates Coach Dinwiddie and his staff and why they need to be recognized. But yeah, it's like you said, it goes hand in hand with having a good front office too. JB, let's get into some of the offseason developments. We're not going to go into like every free agent signing or anything like that, or re-signings. I guess we have at this point, not free agent signings. That will be for next season when we take a look at. We've had a time to look at some film from some of these new signings over the last couple of weeks and re-signings of players from the practice squad. But one that I think we do need to talk about is a story that came out from Sportsnet's Arash Madani. He had a report a few weeks ago that Brent Monson, a former Calgary Stampeders defensive coordinator, had been signed by the Argos as their defensive coordinator. Now, the team has not come out and made any official statement on this. We don't usually talk about stories like this unless the team has made a statement on it. But coming from Arash Madani and knowing how well he's respected, I think it is worth talking about here, even if it's preemptive or a little bit jumping the gun because they haven't officially announced him yet. I think there's a couple things that we have to consider in this report. So Brent Monson, first of all, we talked about him a few weeks ago when Calgary decided not to renew his contract. We talked about Killam being obviously the big catch from Calgary, and he's obviously been named as the head coach there in Edmonton. He's going to go on to start assembling his staff. But Monson, we talked about, is a guy that you need to find a way to get on your coaching staff. We both have tremendous respect for what he's been able to do in Calgary since, and working his way up from the very bottom. Like, this is a guy that coached in the same coaching circles as we did. We never went head to head with Brent Monson, but he worked his way up from OVFL and high school coaching in our backyard, and then ended up working his way up in the Calgary Stampeders organization and spent the last several seasons as the defensive coordinator. He's a great defensive coordinator, and you do want him in the building. There's no question about that. But the reason that this has to be, I think, very carefully handled is that William Fields and Kevin Iben were outstanding this year as co-defensive coordinators. How do you go about managing a situation like this where you need to take Monson because he's so good, but man, Fields and Iben did everything and more that you would expect of them, and were brilliant this season, and probably just as responsible as anybody for that Grey Cup victory. How do you manage this if you're in charge here, JB?
Yeah, really difficult. It's hard to know what conversations were had between people. Um, it is a business, you know. It's not show friendship, so you know it's easy for me to kind of be cold about that when a coach of that ability, you know, pops up. You see it sometimes. I mean, there have been times, you know, where head coaches have become available and organizations probably should have fired their head coach to grab the new head coach, but they didn't. And you know, that's a, you know, a conversation about loyalty. I think it's hard in a business to maintain loyalty. The two coaches were amazing this year. The defense with all new players, or a lot of new players, a lot of stitched together guys, taught some young guys in that secondary. Really did a fantastic job. You know, shut down Winnipeg in the Grey Cup. Are very deserving of getting to stay. But you know, sometimes you get big-footed out of jobs. And you know, having been big-footed out of a few jobs, it stings, you know, and you're mad. But you know, I do think at the end of the day, the organization has to go with what they feel is the best for the organization. I just hope they go about it in the right way. I think there are right ways to do it and wrong ways. I hope that they do it in a way that is respectful and shows the proper level of appreciation if they do make the coaching change.
Yeah, and I think ideally this story wouldn't have broken, right? Like from an organizational standpoint, you don't want this out there because you want to be able to just handle everything internally and sort everything out. Because, like you said, it's you have to be very careful with it. You want to handle it the right way. You would love to have all three guys on your staff. I don't know if it's possible. Obviously, both Ivan and Fields are going to be highly respected around the CFL and certainly looked at by pretty much every staff. There's no CFL team that wouldn't want to have either one of those guys on their organization. And so, yeah, as an Argos management group, you have to look at it really carefully and say, what is the best thing for the team here? We've got these three guys who are all brilliant. We'd love to have them all as part of this machine. And yet that may not be possible. So how do we handle it? And it's just another one of those reminders. We see it all the time with players. You don't see it as much with coaches, where you're reminded of the business side of it. And I hate that part of it. I love football so much. I hate that it is a business, but I understand that that's how it is. And so you just got to grit your teeth sometimes and make those tough decisions. So we'll see what the Argos come up with. We'll see when or if there is an announcement at some point. I'm sure there will be at some point. But yeah, as of yet, there hasn't been anything, and maybe they're trying to sort of figure out where everybody's going to land first before they start, handing around titles and making public statements and issuing press releases. So we'll see how that all works out. But it's definitely a good situation for the Toronto Argonauts, where you're talking about really good coaches, and the Argos are going to end up with at least one terrific coach, if not more. All right, let's get into free agency, JB. This is not quite the same free agency as last year, but it's not great either. Now, you look around at other CFL teams, the Toronto Argonauts don't have it worse than anybody else, really. In fact, that they have far fewer free agents than most teams. That said, there are some big names on the list. And if you listening to this have not been following along and don't know who's up for free agency, I'll go through the list for you here. And then JB and I are going to talk about specific guys that we think are must-sign guys for the Toronto Argonauts. So let's start on the offensive side of the ball first. We'll go through positional groups. Starting at quarterback, you've got Nick Arbuckle, Cameron Dukes, Brian Scott, all as free agents. Chad Kelly is under contract, but the organization is going to have to decide what to do there. We know they would love to have Nick Arbuckle back in a backup capacity. We know what he's been able to do, but with his performance, is Nick Arbuckle going to be sought after by other teams around the league? Like, remember, he was just sitting at home doing nothing, and the Argos sort of discovered him as a star. Is it going to be a fight to get Nick Arbuckle back as a Toronto Argonaut, JB?
I don't think so. I think people will remember his time in Ottawa. I think people will look to that to be A little bit, as his reputation is growing, I think people will look at, like that's something Dinwiddie was able to pull off, but it's not necessarily you something you can repeat at your own team. So I'd be surprised if there was a big push, just because he's been around and guys have seen him without Dinwiddie. So my guess would be no, there won't be a lot of push for him.
I would love to see Arbuckle back in double blue. I would love to see them add a gigantic quarterback runner for those short yardage situations that we talked about all season long. And I'd love to see Brian Scott and Cameron Dukes battling it out for a roster spot as well. I like all these guys. They're guys that you would love to have everybody back, but I do think they need to add that size to the quarterback room as a runner at some point. So that'll be a next season topic. But yeah, for quarterbacks, quite a lot of guys. Everyone not named Chad Kelly is up in free agency potentially. On the offensive line, you got Landon Rice, the tackle, Gregor McKellar, guard, and Isaiah Cage, left tackle. This is interesting because Cage obviously is hugely valuable. McKellar too. I don't think there's any, I think getting McKellar back is going to be really tough because there's so many teams around the league. Pretty much every team around the league could use him as a starting guard. And Toronto has other options. So his value for other teams probably is going to be higher. For Isaiah Cage, outstanding left tackle, the Argos have to decide if they're going to go Canadian at that position. If they do, then Isaiah Cage isn't in the picture anymore because someone's going to pay him a lot of money to be their left tackle. He's a great left tackle. But if the Argos decide, you know what, we're going to stick with two Americans there, then yeah, you desperately need to find a way to get Isaiah Cage back. But I just think the success they had with Ryan Hunter, I know he didn't have a great game in the Grey Cup, but Grey Cup aside, played really well at left tackle, and going 4 Canadians on that O-line gives you huge ratio advantages. So in terms of that positional group, it could be that none of those 3 guys come back. We'll have to wait and see. Going to the running backs room, you've got Kadeem Carey, Brandon Calver, both as free agents. We'll talk more about Kadeem Carey later, I'm sure. But yeah, signing him to that 1-year deal, they call this a prove it deal sometimes. He proved it, and I can't imagine there won't be a number of teams salivating about the idea of Kadeem Carey in their backfield after what Toronto was able to do with him this season. And usually teams have a ton of receivers up for free agency, only 2 for the Toronto Argonauts, DeMonte Coxie and then special team star Janarian Grant. We'll see how that goes. Coxie, there isn't another DeMonte Coxie on the team. There's not another Janarian Grant in the league. We'll have to see how they go about handling that. And then through the defensive side of the ball, a lot of guys on the D-line. You got Woody Barron, Jared Brinkman, Jake Serezna, Robbie Smith. Those are certainly the last 3 are as starters. Like Brinkman, Serezna, Smith. That's 3 of your 4 starters. That's everybody but Flo Romolade on your defensive line. You got to bring a couple of those guys back. You'd think Woody Barron, I don't know if he's in the plans or not, but that positional group obviously is an area of concern. And then we get to linebacker where the concerns elevate even further because you've got Wyndham McManus, potentially the best defensive player in the entire league as a free agent, along with Fraser Sopik. And they consider Robert Priester a linebacker, although I kind of put him in the DB category as a sandbacker and halfback. But yeah, between Sopik and McManus, those are guys you would love to have back, but you know that their price, and McManus especially, his price is going to be through the roof. So we'll talk about those guys too a bit, I'm sure. And then at DB, Adeleke, Deshaun Amos, Kerfella Exume, Jamie Harry, Tavares McFadden, Royce Metier. That is a lot of DB studs out there. And Deshaun Amos and Royce Metier probably lead that group. Tavares McFadden not far behind. Add Priester to that mix. There are a lot of players on defense who are up. And then special teams, we already talked about Janarian Grant, but John Haggerty, also a free agent, a punter going to this offseason. So, man, there are some, it's not as epic as last year's list, but on the defensive side of the ball, it may be, because it feels like every positional group could get hit really hard. JB, let's start at this conversation. If you have to bring, if you can only bring 3 guys back from all those free agents, and obviously we're hoping it's a lot more, but who are your 3 at no matter the cost, you got to re-sign these guys? Let's talk about them one at a time.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a lot. I think mine are not very clever in terms of who I want to bring back. I think I want to bring back cornerstones of the team. I mean, I thought Carey played fantastic. I know he's getting a little older, and once running backs turn 30, it's questionable. But I didn't think I thought they used him very efficiently. I think he has another season in him. I thought he ran incredibly hard. I thought he was the difference in a number of the games this year. So for me, I really want to bring back Carey. I thought he played incredibly well. From all accounts, he was a fantastic teammate. So I think you can get Carey at a good price because of his age. And I'd love to see him come back on a 1 year deal.
Yeah, he looked outstanding, and I'll play devil's advocate because I do want Kerry back as well. But I think playing the other side of it, you say he's 32 years old. He proved it this year. Like this was his prove it season. He did it. He won a Grey Cup. I think the argument would be like for a guy turning 33 next year, are you going to get that same level of effort and commitment? And again, everyone that's watched Kerry play knows that you get that no matter what. But I think if you're looking to argue the other side of it and, is it a time to move on or should we find someone else? I think those are probably the points you bring up. And I do think he's going to be in some demand. I know you don't usually sign running backs at that age, but we've seen running backs in the CFL kind of go against that stereotype of running backs over 30 you don't touch. Like look at the season Kadeem Carey had in the year that he turned 32. So we'll see how they handle that. But that's one of your three must sign guys. Who's your next guy?
Oh well, my next guy is obviously McManus. That's the big ticket. I know there are guys out there who might be a little younger and they probably efficiently have their eye on. For me, though, I'm kind of, going back to my former Patriot fandom days, with Vrabel and Brewski and Mayo in the middle. Like, I just want that there. I know that it's going to be expensive, but I just think what he brings to the team is so much more than his athletic ability. I think he brings an edge and a belief that they are the toughest, MFs who are walking onto the field, and you just cannot have enough of that. And we talked back with Edwards, the blue flame. Winton is a blue flame, and you have to have it. You cannot win football games without a couple of blue flame guys. So for me, McManus is, within reason. I'm sure Saskatchewan or Edmonton might blow them out of the water with an offer, but I would love to see them bring McManus back. He is, he is the captain of the team.
I would love to have Wyndham McManus back. I think he is the best defensive player in the CFL. And the only reason he wasn't in the conversation for that this year is because he missed a number of games in the middle of the season. If he had been healthy all season long, I think he would have been right there in talks and he would have been the East's representative as the defensive player of the year. That said, I don't know if this is a move that the Argonauts are going to be able to make. And I think fans need to brace themselves for this possibility because like you said, there's going to be a team that offers like every player has a value. Every player has a value. There's no teams value players differently, but you can't say players have unlimited value. There's no such thing as that. In a salary cap world, every player has a value. I don't know what Wyndham McManus is worth. He's worth as much as anybody in the CFL. He's worth as much as any defensive player. There's no question. Someone is going to want to pay more than that, and I think someone will. There are 6 CFL teams currently without a middle linebacker. One of those teams is going to make an offer for Wyndham McManus that is just not financially sensible to match. And so you're going to have to hope as an organization that he wants to take a discount to stay in Toronto, but I'm not sure that's the right move for him. I don't know how many seasons he's got left, a few certainly, but he's got a family and he's thinking about earning potential and everything else. And I think as Wyndham McManus, you take a deal if someone is going to go just absolutely bonkers and drive a truck up to your house filled with money, then yeah, I think you do consider that. And so, yeah, I think fans need to brace for the possibility that somebody just does something absurd with McManus. And I think, you can find other guys out there if you need to. No one that's McManus. You're not going to find anyone as good as McManus. There isn't anyone. But you've got guys like Jameer Thurman who are excellent middle linebackers. Again, those six teams that are losing a guy, those guys are all out there. And I think, Thurman is probably my favorite non-McManus middle linebacker free agent. But yeah, there are a ton to choose from. And so it's not that you can't replace him. You can't replace him at that level. But there are guys who can come in and still be excellent middle linebackers on what will already be a good defense. So again, brace for that, fans. I hope Wyndham McManus re-signs in Toronto. I think he is the best defensive player in the league, as I've said many times. But be ready for that not happening. There may be another team who just makes it impossible or financially irresponsible to re-sign McManus, as amazing as he is. And who's your third guy, JB?
My third guy with McManus, I'm okay with taking the credit card out and going above the limit. I think sometimes you have to be a little bit reckless. My third guy, though, if we can get him at a good price, which will be hard, is I'd love to see Janarian Grant back. I remember the terrible days of the kick return and bemoaning it every day. He was fantastic. He was a weapon. He gave them fantastic starting position. You could argue he was as responsible for their Grey Cup win as anybody, in terms of games that he single-handedly won for them during the regular season when they didn't have a quarterback, his playoff performance. I think he deserves big money. I think they should give him, reasonable big money. He's not a starting linebacker, but coach also had some nice plays for him in the offense. He was more than just a specialist. I think they'd be making a mistake letting him go. I know Winnipeg. I mean, just ask Winnipeg if you should let him go.
Yeah.
I mean, Winnipeg might come. It depends how their ego is feeling with a bag of money. But if you ask Winnipeg, would you like Janarian Grant back? I mean, obviously, they're gonna say yes.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if he's even going to be as expensive as we might think, because he's turning 32 next year. People get really hung up on that stuff. I look at what he's been able to do. He's a game changer. He is worth being paid as the highest special teams player in the league. He won't be. And yet I think, if you're anywhere close to that and you can make a deal, I think you absolutely do that, because like you said, when you don't, you see the difference. And he single-handedly changed my view of returners. I've always had almost statistical belief in some positional groups. I feel that way about running backs. I feel a little bit that way about linebackers, although more in the American game than the Canadian game. And with kick and punt returners, I've always kind of felt it was way more system and the blockers that you have than the returner. Janarian Grant was one of those guys. Watching him up close this year, he made me reconsider my philosophical view on the importance of the returner, because he did some things that, had you had another guy out there, just simply wouldn't have happened. His vision is what makes him special. Yes, he's got great speed. Yes, he's hard to bring down, especially for a guy that doesn't weigh like 220. He's really hard to tackle. But I think that it's his ability to see the blocks developing in front of them and to use his lateral agility to set up the blocks that aren't quite there yet. That he's elite at. And I don't know and I know actually that that's not something that will fade with age. That kind of thing actually gets better with age. He will lose speed. He will lose cutback ability and agility. That's going to happen naturally as he ages. The vision won't go. The vision will get better. And so I'd love to see him come back next season as well. All right, so you've done your three guys, JB. Great choices. I'm going to give you my three guys, and I think what's really interesting about this is that none of them are the same. I would love to bring back your three. I've highlighted three different guys. Here they are. We're going to start with the defensive line. I think number one priority is Jared Brinkman. And the reason for that is I don't think there's another Jared Brinkman in the CFL. I don't think you can go out and find a replacement for him. There are other guys that are good. There are a ton of good three techs. He's a nose who can actually generate pressure on the quarterback. He is, since the moment he arrived, we've been blown away by his first step for a big man. He is just this four-square, solid individual who flies off the line with great explosion and acceleration and stuffs any middle run, like single-handedly takes care of any middle run, but it's a passing league. He still is able to generate pressure. And when he's not getting there for sacks, he's getting other people's sacks. You look at the sack numbers for Ceresna, for Flo Remalade, those guys earn them, but Brinkman was a part of that in being able to hold up traffic and to be able to take on two guys and force everyone else to go one-on-one. So for me, Jared Brinkman is number one priority. Can you see the Argos being as good a run-stopping team, JB, if they don't have Brinks back in the fold?
Yeah, I think he's the perfect kind of signing for them. I think, I mean, unless the Hamilton single white female Hamilton comes looking for another Argo, I think he's the kind of guy who's going to be undervalued around the league. He doesn't put up big sack numbers. He's not necessarily at the center of your screen making plays, but he is crucial as part of their rotation. So I would bet they get him at a good price. I think that it's hard. It's hard. I mean, my brother who casually watches the CFL, but in italics casually, comments upon how every team seems to be just all ex-Argos. It does feel that way sometimes, and I'm sure somebody's looking for him, but I like them to sign him. I think he's a nice mid-level signing that they can get at a good price.
And I think between he and my next guy up on the defensive line, who is Jake Ceresna, I don't know if there's another Jake Ceresna, but there are.
No, now you're getting into the sedans on the lot.
Yeah, well, I know. Like there are other guys that can be really good three techs. The versatility of Ceresna, I think, is what makes him a real pick. There's no other Jared Brinkman. I'm not sure there's another Ceresna, and that's why he's number two. I think you can find other good three techs. You can find guys that are versatile that can go inside and outside. I don't know if you can find anyone else that's at that level. And so that's why he's my number two in terms of guys you've got to bring back. What Ceresna did, he played a lot on the edge in Edmonton. Toronto didn't use him that way, at least in alignment. They would sometimes use him on the edge in a three-man line, but more often than not, what they would do is line him up inside, and they would twist with him because they trusted him to be able to contain. And you'd fire your edge inside, or even sometimes line up Flo, like we saw them line up Flo as a middle linebacker sometimes, and then you'd fire Ceresna around the outside, have Flo blitz through the middle. I just think you've got Flo under contract. The combination of Ceresna and Flo together on that side of the ball, especially if you've already taken care of business and signed Brinkman, like those three guys are unstoppable. And I feel bad leaving Robbie Smith out of my three must-sign guys because he's a big part of that unit too. I just don't think I can spend all three of my picks on the same positional group. I feel like that's irresponsible with all the free agents there are, especially on defense. So I'm going to stop it there. But yeah, Brinkman and Ceresna on the defensive line, that's a great start because you'll agree, like as much as linebackers, they are important. DBs are hugely important in the CFL. But if you've got a great pass rush and if teams can't run against you, like how much easier does that make a DB's job? Like you've got to agree with that part.
I do. I mean, I think it's probably Ceresna or McManus, not both. But there is a chance that Ceresna doesn't quite top out. Like as an Argos fan, I think we enjoyed him and we saw what he could do. But, I don't think necessarily statistically he blew the roof off the season in terms of his capabilities. So
he was tied for the league in sacks, but there were like 5 or 6 guys tied for it. But yeah, both he and Ralph Hawley were right there.
Yeah, I know, but I don't think the numbers were eye popping. I think he can be an eye popping guy. Like I thought he was good this year. I think he can be great. I hope that we can get him for the good money and get the great.
And the question is like, I wonder how many sacks Ceresna would have had if he didn't get there a split second after Ralph Hawley got there or Flo Remalade got
Yeah,
there. That's
no,
the
he was
problem.
he was he was a fantastic member of the rotation. I hope that he's more in rotational money than say like star money.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that is. Like he's into his 30s now too, and so we'll see how
Yeah.
teams evaluate him. But man, I would love to have him back. And also played through a lot of injuries. Like I know that shoulder was bothering him well after he returned from missing the couple of weeks that he missed. But he never really let his level of play drop. My third guy, and this was a tough one to me because I'm going to shout out Royce Metier, a safety that I would love to bring back. But between these two guys, I decided that the harder guy to replace for me is Deshaun Amos. I think you need one of these guys in the secondary back for sure. You'd love to have multiple guys back. You'd love to bring back all of them, like from Adeleke to McFadden and Metier and Amos. But I think the guy that had the most impressive season to me this year was Amos. He was my personal pick for East Defensive Player of the Year. I thought he was outstanding this year. His stats didn't bear that out because no one threw to him. When they did throw to him, he picked it off. And when they didn't throw to him but threw near him, he recovered fumbles. He was so hard for opposing quarterbacks to even bring into the picture that he single-handedly changed schemes and game plans for opposing offenses. So a guy like that, I think it's a tougher sell for him. He and his agent, obviously, I think, they will look at, they'll look at the film. They'll look at the PFF scores, and because that's where you're going to see like how good he was, because the stats don't tell it. A guy with far fewer tackles than a lot of stars like Roland Milligan and other guys like at his positional group, but a guy that stats didn't tell the full story for. Whatever he gets paid will probably be less than he's actually worth. And I think Toronto should do everything they can to get him back under contract at that field halfback spot. And that's the other thing, too. Being a field half instead of a boundary half, that may reduce his value, too. But it doesn't reduce his value on the football field in my book. I would love to have him out there. So those are my three guys, JB. I know we're missing a ton. Like, we didn't have DeMonte Coxie in there. We didn't have Royce Metier in there. We didn't have Isaiah Cage in there. And those are all stars that really need to be re-signed. And yet there's only going to be so much money to go around. The Argos got to stop winning Grey Cups like this. It'll make it a lot easier in the offseason for the management team.
Yeah, for sure. But it's the nature of the league that players switch a lot more than they do in the NFL. So you do have to kind of get used to it.
Before we get to our awards, let's just recap our picks for the season. We had both our Put Me Down for 20 numbers and our CFL picks. And I will just give you a quick recap, tell you how we ended up there. JB, for the first time in our history, we both ended up in the black. We both made money on our golden fleece, we made fleeces rather, on our golden fleece wagers, thanks to having the Argos at plus 330 in the Grey Cup. That paid off for both of us. And so you were able to dig yourself out of a hole. Think of you're the most improved fleece gambler of the season, without question, going from having blown your entire bankroll last season to ending up 6 golden fleeces this year. You finished with 206 golden fleeces. I finished with 289 golden fleeces. It was a good year for both of us that way. And the picks were similar. Our CFL picks, I finished the year 55, 29, and 2, plus 26. You finished the year 47, 37, and 2, plus 10. I think we represented ourselves well there. And we decided we have this ongoing wager where the winner of the picks has to buy the others a flight of beer at something in the water. I still owe you, JB, for last year's victory that you
Yeah,
somehow
we'll
took
do
over
one where
me.
we will each purchase each other.
Yeah, well, that's the right way to do it. They don't cancel each other out. We're going to go down to something in the water. We were hoping to do it for this final episode of the season. We couldn't quite make it work out schedule wise, but you and I will have to get down there during the holidays, perhaps, and we'll buy each other a flight of delicious beer from Something in the Water Brewing to even our debts here going into the next season. All right, JB, let's get to it. It is awards time. People wait all year for this. It's bigger than the Oscars, bigger than the Grammys.
You should not wait all year for it.
No, you should not wait all year for this. It is the X's and Argos end of season awards. JB, why don't you start it off? What do you have for us for the X's and Argos awards? Who's adding some hardware to their trophy case?
Oh, well, it was a long and arduous process going through film. In terms of selecting this year's awards winners was not done just prior to this podcast. And I think my first award winner, I was torn. I really love the Brinkman Hungry Bear. I have to say, but I'm gonna go with Ralph Hawley's kind of honky tonk man Detroit. Guitar string strumming sack dance that he did in Winnipeg. Especially for a rookie, I love seeing that kind of swag. Had a bit of flair to it. The Argos don't have a ton of flair in their dances after sacks, so I liked Ralph Hawley's guitar strumming sort of banjo bowl-esque. Although I guess a nod to his hometown of Detroit.
Yeah, like best celebration award, the Detroit Dog for I call it the Motown Throwdown. I don't know. I think you're
There you go.
Yeah, but Motown Throwdown, Detroit Dog. Like you can't go wrong with those. And Ralph Hawley, very much deserving. And he's one of those players. Like we talked about guys that are being lost in free agency. The Argos may be without Ralph Hawley at least for a little bit. I don't know. He had a workout with Tennessee. He's got a workout with Cleveland later on this week. He's under contract through 2025, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's at the very least on an NFL practice squad, given what he was able to do. Like he's a guy that think of him as, his size, like, over 6 feet, but only just, and at 285, he's listed at. He was sub 5 for his 40. Like this is an athlete, a guy with explosiveness, a 7'5", 3-cone, 30-inch vertical. Like you don't see D tackles with 30-inch verticals. It doesn't happen a lot. And so they look at those numbers. They look at his film from this year and how he was not just a run stopper, but also able to really get home, tied for the league in sacks on a team where they really had to spread the wealth. I could see him sticking for at least a period of time in the NFL. So I don't know if the Argos are going to start their season with Ralph Hawley next year. Maybe he joins them a little bit later on, much like the Jamal Peters situation a few seasons ago where he was with the Atlanta Falcons for the start of the year and then ended up back in Toronto. I think we could see something like that for Ralph Hawley. Personally, I'm pulling for him. I hope he sticks in the NFL. I hope he impresses the Cleveland Browns so much this week that they sign him immediately. And he's a player for them going forward. But we'll see. But yeah, he's very much deserving of the Best Celebration Award, JB. Good pick. I will go to the next one. For me, this is the Best Play of the Season. This was a tough one to come up with. There were so many highlights of the year. I think ultimately what made it for me was the magnitude of the play. So a combination of how important the play was in the big picture, the overall scheme of the Argos season, and how impressive the play was physically. And I'm going to go back to the East Final in Montreal, the last play of the half, where most coaches would have kicked a field goal. Ryan Dinwiddie decides we're going to go for it, and Chad Kelly decides I'm going for my man DeMonte Coxey in the end zone. With no time left on the clock, DeMonte Coxey goes up and catches a perfect pass from Chad Kelly, contorts himself as he's bringing it in with one hand right on the sideline, and is able to get his feet down in bounds as the clocks hit zero. For me, that was the play of the season because that left the Argos up going in at halftime in a game where they had been largely dominated in that first half, and suddenly there they were right in the picture, in the mix. And had it not been for that play, I don't know if the Argos win that game. I don't know if they go on to win the Grey Cup. So that is the best play of the season. Chad Kelly, DeMonte Coxey, you got to split your X's and Argos awards, but I'm giving it to you both for this season. What do you have up next, JB?
Next is the ever popular Best Haggerty Award. Once more competitive when Josh Haggerty was on the Argos. But after some film study and some statistical analysis, it looks like John Haggerty is going to repeat as Best Haggerty on the Argos. So congratulations to John. I feel like he really pulled it off, and we'll see if next year he gets a little more competition for it.
It's hard to argue against picking John Haggerty as the best Haggerty on the Argos this year. I will say Adam Guillemette, for me, was in the running late in the year. But ultimately, I think we had to give it to...
It depends how literal one's qualification for the award is. Is it a name, or is it a feeling? That'll be something for the awards committee to ponder in the off season.
Because I've always felt it's half about the aura of Haggerty. And so you don't necessarily need the name on the nameplate to win the Best Haggerty Award. But we'll see. Again, well-deserved. No, in seriousness, he was great for the Argos this year. Didn't get talked about as much because you had some absurd performances around the league. Like Edmonton was just, they were in heaven every time they went back to punt, which is a rarity. You don't usually cheer that part of your game on. But, they had some great performances. And, Haggerty was right there, but maybe didn't get talked about as much because, he wasn't necessarily leading the league, but he was right there. He was such an asset for the Argos and a guy that hopefully they find a way to bring back.
And it all paid off.
Yeah, Best Haggerty Award. You can't say it didn't work out for him. The best dressed Argo. And for this, I went back and looked at pictures from every single game as the Argos' brilliant social media account tweets out pictures of players arriving. I've also considered players on airplanes coming off the plane. We had a lot of hoodies, a lot of track pants, but one guy that never ever was caught in less than the absolute best outfit was our winner this year, Royce Metier, the best dressed Toronto Argonaut for this year. Shout out to the St. Edmund Campion Bears from North Peel, where Royce Metier played his high school ball. He brought it every single time. You look back through that Argos social media account, find me a picture of Royce Metier where he doesn't look outstanding. You can't do it. Very well-deserved best dressed Argo for this year. What do you have up next, JB?
Next is one that has come up. Is who is going to replace Alette in the Danforth wrestling community? And I don't think there can be any doubt that Derek Parrish of the Argos is crying out for a professional wrestling career. I don't know if they've reached out to him or if anyone has, but I think I can safely say that he would sign a wrestling contract very quickly.
He will
if
for
they
sure.
offered it to him, and might even forgo football for it. But I think he'd be very good at it. I worry sometimes that his helmet is a little too big, but from a wrestling perspective, I think he is a star in waiting. So I think he can take the Olette mantle. And so Danforth Wrestling, if you're out there, I think Derek Parrish is your man.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of helmet Derek Parrish has. I'm fine with big helmets. I'm okay with you getting out there with a big helmet, but I do think that'd be a great wrestling name, Big Helmet. But yeah, he's got some sort of Rydell variant, I think. It's not as weird as those 02s that you see all the Calgary guys wearing, but wear the helmet that is most comfortable, that you are happiest with for sure, but very much deserving as the most likely to continue AJ Olette's wrestling career award winner. You look back to these Argos social media videos, everyone's coming off the practice field. They're all wearing like pads and their practice shorts, and Paris is wearing like a wrestling trunks. That's what he's in every time.
1984.
I know, he's basically there in his underwear, and that's just how Paris walks around.
Look, I agree. I don't know why I don't know what the holdup is, but I mean, let's make this happen.
The next award is the guy you want to sit next to on the bus award. And this is one of our most sought after awards every season. And this one I'm going to give to special teams coordinator Mickey Donovan, who is without question the guy you want to sit next to on the bus or the airplane for that matter, or the bar for that matter. I've been fortunate enough to have a number of off-field conversations with Mickey Donovan. He is a fantastic guy, great in a conversation. He can talk to you about anything and is happy to take it on to, having spent some time with him, just a wonderful person and a fantastic personality. And there's so many characters on this Toronto Argonauts team and coaching staff. Mickey Donovan is, without question, one of the guys that you have to, at some point, sit down and have a few words with, because, he's interesting, thoughtful, nicest guy in the world, and definitely the guy that I want to sit next to on the bus or the plane. So congratulations, Mickey, on your Xs and Argos award. What's up next, JB?
Next is a slightly different one. This is a Bleed Double Blue. This is for somebody who, with all their time around the team, was somebody who was just absolutely, committed to the team, but also was like kind of a great person to be around and sort of enjoyable. And, for me this year, it's got to go to your broadcast partner. It's got to go to Mike Hogan. His articles on the website, his calls, his back must be sore from carrying you for season after season. He's fantastic. He's great and personable. He absolutely just lives and dies with how the team is doing. They're incredibly lucky to have a guy who is that professional, that experienced, but also genuinely, legitimately like part of the franchise and pulling for it. So for me, I think as Argo fans, we're very lucky to have Mike Hogan, and he's on the website he writes some fantastic articles. So I think he's a multifaceted, talented.
Yeah, and for the. And from the tribute to Pete Martin that he did to the player analysis that you see every week, like he is so good at his job, and that's not even his, like, he's got so many different hats that he wears with the organization too, and he's good at every single one of them, the best at every single one of them. So very well deserving, and it's been such a pleasure to get to know Mike over the last 2 seasons a little better, being up there in the booth with him. Just absolutely bleeds double blue. Cares so much about this team, and you see him out there on social media too. It's just constant, team first and an organization guy. So very much deserving of this. And like you said, he's had to carry me now for 2 seasons, and so that alone is worthy of an award win. And while we're giving credit to Mike Hogan, I think we do have to shout out everyone that we interact with and work with as part of covering this team. We love to we love to go and cover games, and Chris Belenovich does a great job. We spent a lot of time too with John Magri, and our next award winner, which is going to fit into this category too. This is the Unsung Game Day Hero Award, and this goes to press box manager Corey Mark, who is absolutely fantastic. She has had to put up with us, JB, for several years now. We started doing this back in 2018, 2019, and to have to deal with not just us, but the other characters in the in the media. Corey is an absolute pro. She does so many things, goes out of her way to make sure that the press box functions. And I don't think, if you haven't been up in that press box, and most of you probably haven't, you don't understand the number of fires she is putting out on a daily basis, and then going above and beyond. As I've started to age, she has started to bring me large print versions, customized large print versions of rosters that I can stick on my wall in case my eyesight's not up to the task, and it's not. So, everything that she does as part of her job, she's amazing. And she's, a woman that has 100 different jobs, all of such high profile, and to get in there every week and have the privilege of working with Corey Mark, I think it is such an honor for us to be there every week. And I don't think there's anyone more deserving of the Unsung Game Day Hero Award than Corey.
No, and it's one of the nice things is we get to, meet at least some of the behind the scenes staff of cheering for the organization, because as you meet these people who are working incredibly hard. So when the team wins, you feel you feel happy for them as much as the players. So it's kind of an added bonus of our sort of position on the slightly behind the curtain, one toe or two behind the curtain, to see some of the people who work so hard for the organization, and it's nice to cheer for them because they're such great people.
Up next, we have Future American Star. We had some options here, JB. Where did we end up going with this call on our trophy winner?
Yeah, my choice, it was hard because people sort of came to the foreground, and even my choice, I think, is probably borderline a bit obvious, but that certainly has never stopped me. For me, Isaac D'Arcangelo, I thought had a fantastic season. I think that he really flashed as a starter, and his game speed is really fantastic. Like his ability to cover, I think he's going to be, obviously depending on what they do at the linebacker spot, but I think he has probably changed some of the equations for the front office, because I'm sure they feel confident plugging him in as a full-time starter next year if that's what they want to do.
Yeah, and a couple of the guys that would have been in the running became stars. Like this is a spot that we might have in other years given to Benji Franklin or someone like that, but they became stars and weren't eligible for the award, and like Ralph Hawley as well. And so I like your pick as Isaac D'Arcangelo. There were so many players that really came to the forefront this season. D'Arcangelo didn't get his opportunity till later in the year, but yeah, we watched him back in training camp. He jumped out, but was a guy that needed to learn the game a little bit and had some players in front of him who were really high profile. And once the Argos shifted to going with 4 Canadian linemen, they were able to dress him at that will linebacker spot. And yeah, he really impressed.
Mark Milton's in that mix too, but yeah. I just think for somebody who looked like maybe would be a special teamer and just absolutely took that starting position, and so confident, I just think the sky's the limit for him.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think he's very much deserving. And for future Canadian star, I'm going to go with Tyshawn Blackburn. And I love the story of Tyshawn Blackburn because he wasn't a guy I was overly excited about in the draft. When the Argos selected him, he was, I think, the only Argos draft pick that was selected higher than I had him ranked on my personal board. And I if you don't know, I spend a lot of time in the offseason evaluating upcoming CFL talent. I spend a lot of time with all of the U Sports prospects, the NCAA Canadian prospects. I write up reports. I go through and grade them. I had over 20,000 words written up this season on my CFL draft prospectus for this year's players. And it's not something that I publish. It's just something that I do for my own record keeping and my own entertainment. And Blackburn was a guy that escaped me. I did not have him highly ranked. When the Argos drafted him, I was a little bit confused by it, and he proved me wrong. Just like anyone in scouting, I make mistakes, and Tyshawn Blackburn's evaluation, I can already say, was a mistake on my part, because he should have been drafted probably even higher than the Argos took him, not lower. He went out from the beginning, from the word go, and was a special teams contributor. And then when he had to, was able to fill in at safety. He was able to fill in at Sam. He's a real player in this league and a highly skilled and versatile DB with great length who can continue to be a special teams demon. And, really impressed me and is, in my opinion, and I think yours as well, JB, a future Canadian star. So yeah, very much well-deserved Tyshawn Blackburn. We'll wrap this up. Our last one, the most entertaining practice moment of the season. I don't know if this comes close to the last couple of years. Going back a couple of years, we had the Haggerty versus Haggerty dance-off, which won it. We also had someone doing a Sean Oakman impression during stretches, and Sean Oakman not knowing where it was coming from and walking around trying to find out who was doing their Oakman impression. This one's not quite on that level, but it was a highly entertaining practice moment. The day that Baron Miles signed, he drove onto the practice field at Lamport Stadium in an SUV, got out of the SUV on the field, and got right into drills as the coaches kind of looked around like, what is going on here? To me, that was the most entertaining practice moment of 2024. And with that will wrap up our 2024 Xs and Argos awards.
Oh, is that how long the podcast was?
Yeah, it was an entire year's worth of of recording. This was a long one, JB, but it's our last one of the season. We will be back for free agency frenzy. It's a while from now, but this is our off season now too, and so we hope that you will join us in 2025 for the free agency frenzy, and then of course we'll set you up for the draft and stuff after that, and then we'll get into our regular our twice weekly pods after that. But yeah, hopefully. We really should give one last award, JB, and that is the award to our MVPs, which are, of course, our listeners who make this podcast possible. We have grown every single year, and a shout out to our YouTube community too, who has made tremendous strides this year in giving our Spotify and iTunes listeners a run for their money in terms of numbers. But we thank you, the listener. You guys have been awesome. You've been so supportive of our sponsors, and it's great to see the numbers of our podcast at where we are. I know the Argos sometimes are given a hard time for their fandom and the numbers that they draw to stadiums. But if podcast listenership is any indication, there are Argos fans all over the city of Toronto, all throughout Ontario, and all across this country as well. So we thank you, the listener, and you are our last award winner of 2024. Well, that will just about do it for us on this recap episode of the Xs and Argos podcast. Have a great holiday season. Have a happy new year. We will see you in free agency. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.